So, welcome to the first ever C-CAF podcast, and I'm delighted to be joined by Mike Higginson from October 16 Consulting. How you doing, Mike?
Hi, Luke. Yeah, doing really well, thank you.
Good. Yeah, not too bad. The weekend has skipped on by. Hey, we're here already on Monday morning.
Yeah, they always do.
My first thing I've got to ask you, Mike, is why October 16 Consulting? Why is it called that?
Yeah, so I was working in a full-time job back in 2020 and got unfortunately made redundant when COVID hit. And I've been contemplating going it alone, consulting for a period of time. And remarkably, the finishing date of my gardening leave was the 16th of October. So that's when I could officially start business. And also it is my oldest daughter's birthday as well.
Wow. Okay. Oh, so that's it's a double whammy date then.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a great way for me as I'm getting a little bit older to make sure I don't forget when her birthday is, of course.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's like having a wedding anniversary on Valentine's Day, isn't it? It's like I can't forget that. There's no excuses. Yeah.
So
well, I want to give a little bit of context, Mike, as well about how long we've known each other in really extreme circumstances. Is that many years ago now, which makes us both feel really, really old. Is I was working as a care assistant, and for context, Mike was to me at that point, a big time quality and governance, superstar. He was like the David Beckham of my world at that point. And I was probably 17 when I met Mike, and I had a really brief chat with him, but I felt brilliant afterwards. Really, I felt really ambitious at the time as working as a care assistant to be the best I could, and then meeting somebody this high up, it was it was a pretty big deal for me. And then we kind of fast forward like 15 years, Mike, is it? It's got to be around that.
At least, yes, definitely.
Yeah. And then, we've done lots of work over the years through different things. But yeah. And the other important thing to point out, Mike, is we're on complete different ends of the country as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm based up in Yorkshire, although I've always travelled to any end of the country in order to work, from Aberdeen all the way down to Margate in Kent. And yeah, it seems like only yesterday you were there washing up in the kitchen and doing the odd quality audit. I think for your mum as well in the as well. And back in the day, as they say. So,
yeah, funny how the world works, hey?
In fact, thank you for the extreme compliment of being compared to David Beckham, though. I'd love to be a couple of pence behind him when it came to financial standing, let's say.
Yeah, he does okay, doesn't he? He does okay.
I imagine he does, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, we've got a hell of a task in front of us, Mike, because we're going to look at a particular topic, and it's something that's been on my radar for a while. I mean, these conversations keep coming up about requires improvement ratings, and I think the title for this podcast is Navigating Requires Improvement outside of the service. So we get requires improvement from the regulator. And what we're trying to understand what impact that has outside of the home, not inside it. And I know that you're perfectly suited to run through this with me. So I guess that's a really good place to start, Mike. Is what are the other impacts outside of getting that regulatory stamp saying this requires improvement home, and the obvious impact internally? What other things kind of jump out at you that you've seen?
Well, I think that when we consider about requires improvement, or indeed the dreaded inadequate, when CQC darken our door and come and give us these ratings, is that it shakes a business to the core. Absolutely does. It rocks its foundations, because none of us work in health and social care in order to deliver a service that requires improvement. So your confidence automatically will take a knock, and it's very, very easy for anyone as a provider to just turn around and think, well, they're out to get me. This is unfair. It must be biased. They can't have looked at this. They can't have looked at that. And it can cause almost like a grief response, not wanting to trivialize grief, but go through all of those emotions of thinking, well, is this real? Has this happened to me? It's so unfair. It's unbelievable. And as a consultant, one of the first things that I think you need to do really is sort of steady the ship. Emotionally, the turmoil for a provider is one where actually sometimes you have to sort of have a bit of a stabilization factor very quickly and just say, hold on a second, let's just consider, are they right? Take a breath. Let's break the evidence down that's been supplied to us that they say they've seen, and let's start going through an analytical process. I think as more like for a business, I think also you need to sort of consider for the business owner and the directors, it's not just that sharp sudden shock, but it could be a knock-on effect as well in terms of an impact of lost revenue, because the council may come along a little bit later, in fact very soon after, and say, well, if you've got this rating, maybe we shouldn't be making placements with you. Once it's published, you may have families who also fear for what's going to happen to their loved one in the home and may start to think to move their loved one elsewhere. And indeed for staff as well. Staff don't want to do an inadequate job. They don't want to do something that requires improvement. They want to be good. They want to be outstanding. So absolutely, the impact is so far-reaching that, it can be devastating.
It's really interesting, Mike, there that you say about, sometimes you can have that kind of grief response to it. It's like kind of, you always have the emotional response, first of all, to that regulator rating. There's like this emotional reaction and, feeling, really terrible about yourself. And then you start to think about the rational responses to that and understanding, okay, let's have a look and see if this is actually accurate. And then hoping then to make a plan about how you fix that. But I wonder, Mike, how you see the impact then of that backlog of inspections, because that's the other thing that providers are not guaranteed with now, right? To get that, they might work really hard for a year or 2 years to really improve that regulatory rating, but then there's no immediate guarantee that that's going to be lifted anytime soon.
Well, that's right. I mean, there are providers out there who had requires improvement ratings all the way back in 2019. And then, as we've discussed a moment earlier, COVID came along, and indeed the whole landscape really of health and social care monitoring and regulation, not so much compliance, but it has well and truly changed. CQC has had quite a, I would say a momentous change in terms of its personnel and indeed its strategy for working. They've both brought in the new way of regulation as well. And they've done it on the workforce that's constantly being depleted, which must be incredibly tough for all those really good people actually who do work within CQC. Because we don't think of CQC as the enemy, and they're really not. They're actually human beings just like you and I.
Yeah.
And, to have gone through the upheaval and changes that have been there recently, as well as the failed IT system, we all love the portal, don't we?
Yeah.
It's no small task for any of them.
No, it's a huge job, isn't it? Something really interesting there. Years ago, I met an inspector and she was an ex-paramedic. And what she was saying was there's a huge difference from her last job where she turned up and everyone was so eager to see her because they needed her help as a paramedic, to being a CQC inspector when, they open the door and they say the dreaded words that, they're from CQC and show the ID, just full terror. Quite a vast difference, hey?
Yeah, I can remember my very first inspection as a home manager, and the inspector knocking on my door and me opening the door to him. And he introduced himself and said, "Hello, I'm here to do your inspection. I'm from CSCI, as it was then."
Yeah.
And basically I said, "Excellent. Thank you very much for coming. Would you like tea or coffee?" And he said, "No, I'm the inspector, I've come to inspect your service. And I said, that's great. I understand that. But I presume you still drink tea or coffee. Let's start off as we mean to go on, sort of thing. And that ended up having a very good inspection. But that was back in the day when you got ratings by numbers rather than the damning statements of requires improvement. So
they were the 1 to 5, right, Mike?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess that when we think about when we think about then, post inspection, we get a service gets an RI or worse, an inadequate rating. Where would you say like the first place the provider should start with understanding what happened and what do I do? Where do we start with something like that?
I always recommend, certainly from the feedback during an inspection, actually, that we listen to what's being said to us. Feedback has changed dramatically over the years from it being incredibly detailed to it actually being quite vague and not really very specific at all. But I think picking up on that feedback, making copious notes about that feedback can actually be a real lifesaver. But when you actually get that report come through, what really needs to be done is it needs to be analysed line by line. And I'm a great fan of pen and paper, again, probably showing my age, but taking the report and sectioning it off as into each paragraph and putting a plus, a minus, or indeed an equals mark for if the feedback is indifferent or inconsequential. And from that, very quickly, you start to see the story of the inspection. You start to see that actually there's some balance there because there are some positives. And then you start to see how many negatives are there as well. And those points within that, those negatives, they start to begin to form your action plan.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, once you actually do get those negatives, I think it's really important to actually look at the evidence for yourself as well. Mm-hmm. Because inspectors are human, sometimes they do get it wrong. Sometimes they don't look at the whole holistic picture. And you've still got 72 hours, particularly after feedback, where you can actually go back and say, well, yes, we noticed that you saw this care plan. It didn't cover this element of person's care. We have now rectified that within the first 72 hours. And we've done an audit of the other 19 care plans in the service, and we can confirm that all those care plans are correct. Giving the inspector a bit of help and a bit of balance in that way, probably a really good way of trying to change the outcome a slight bit. They're always going to say, well, one wasn't right, therefore it requires improvement, and that's a reasonable judgment. But whatever you can do is really worth doing.
Yeah. I think you were leaning into the factual and accuracy side then, right? About, going through that feedback, going through the draft, and then understanding whether you feel like there was, things on there that were not accurate and you'd like to change. That's something I remember really well, Mike, was writing my first one of those and reading it back thinking, wow, that was some emotional typing I'd done there. It was, it wasn't fact based. It wasn't, it was more about opinion and how I felt. And, again, remembering a consultant I worked with at that time saying to me that you're right. That's an emotional response rather than a factual, rational one.
Yeah.
Is that something that, you would come across in your work now or have done in the past?
Yeah, very much. You can see the raw emotion, and indeed, I have seen some service providers and not restrain them physically, but emotionally restrain them.
Take their keyboard away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because when you start off the sentence with inspector saying, "How dare you?" I think that you may be hard approaching this with the balance and professionalism as is expected, perhaps. But when you care about care and when you actually care about the provision of quality care for people, it is an emotive business. So you shouldn't lose all of that passion, but it does have to be measured and tempered, I feel. And doing that professionally in such a way is great, to actually be able to achieve. But again, this is something that's changed over the years. 5 years ago, one of my first assignments working with a couple of other consultants was to actually turn a home round that was in receipt of an inadequate inspection, indeed was subject to legal proceedings. Obviously, we can't name that service, but myself and those two other consultants, we recovered that home with the team there, obviously, to actually get a good outcome inspection in 5 months. But I can remember doing the factual accuracy return. I can remember sending in by courier evidence to CQC back in the day when you could submit significant evidence, and it taking 3 large business class envelopes to actually send the information. It was over 1,000 pages of documentation, evidence of how things were not as they were, definitely, during the inspection. So we weren't refuting the evidence as such, we were demonstrating what we had done to improve things. And I think that sort of takes us on to the next step, really, that when you've done your analysis, you've argued your factual accuracy, which is a limited opportunity. You're limited to so many words you can put through now. Then once that is considered, really the business needs to start before that of actually getting on with an action plan to put things right and actually to start collecting evidence there and then of what you're doing to put things right as you do it. Because your feedback to relatives, your feedback to residents, your feedback to the council and commissioners within health, and indeed CQC themselves at that point becomes critical. And you need to keep them informed that actually things are getting better or risks are lowering as a result of your actions.
Yeah. I think just going back to that, Mike, that time lapse now of potentially waiting for re-inspection, we're imagining all of those responses, all of that work to, evidence the improvements you've made as a service, and then think that you might wait 4 or 5 years to have that revisited is, there's not much support that you can get for something like that, is there? And I guess going back to that other point you made, Mike, about the financial implications of the staff morale, but the financial implications of dropping off tenders, dropping off frameworks, because the good rating is the bare minimum. It's really hard to understand them from a consultant's point of view, how you support a provider to get to that next stage with such a long time in between.
Yeah, it is. And I think the financial implications can be even broader, particularly when the story hits the press and the media as well.
Yeah.
The longer term impacts over the 4 or 5 years, I think that's where, as a consultant, we can actually help out, because we can go in and do independent quality audits of services, and we should do those reports in a way that is fit to be published as well. So there's a great phrase, which I'm sure a lot of the people watching and listening to this will be familiar with, that basically if you say something, you do something. So you said, we did. And having that approach with CQC is just as legitimate. So CQC said this, we analysed and found that this was correct, or this wasn't quite correct, and this is what we did about it, and this is what we did about it to make sure it never happened again, so that it demonstrates sustainability as well.
Yeah.
And publishing that and having that available for people, I think when you're a provider, then that becomes a marketing tool for you, what your consultant is producing for you. They can turn around on that and say, well, yes, our CQC report, have you seen it? It's not very good. But you know what? We've had this independently reviewed, and it was done at this point and then repeated at this point, and here's the report. You can see that that's in the dim and distant past now. I think that's really important to do that nowadays.
Yeah. Something really interesting there that I just want to lean into, Mike, is about how external consultants' reports are viewed. That there's quite a lot of authorities that do accept that as a kind of interim safeguard, and especially when you look at the financial side of things, like banks, for example, wanting some assurances There's a long waiting period for reinspection of those RI services, for example. And an interim consultant mock inspection can be used to as a finance evidence that the service is running at a good level, for example.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, there are businesses even that specifically work with banks and funders in order to make sure that their investments are onshore and secure. And again, it's another great avenue that being a consultant you can follow.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Mike. So I should have asked you this question right at the beginning, and it's something I want to ask every participant or attendee to these podcasts. And it's something that really stays with me, and I often like to talk about it. Is around that your first experience of social care, and perhaps if a person jumps out at you or something jumps out at you, the hook. What was the thing that got you to be involved in social care so deeply as you are?
The first thing that really hit me was actually my family circumstances and my grandmother living with us. She lived with us at home, and she lived with dementia, and unfortunately as time went on, her behaviours became more and more extreme and challenging, particularly towards my mother. And unfortunately, there was a real lack of support from social services, to the point of my father, bless him, who was a character to be reckoned with, actually turned around to social services in Birmingham in the West Midlands and said, if you do not take my mother into care, then I will put her in a giant wicker basket on the doorstep of the council house, and I will invite the BBC and ITV to come and film this, and I will have a note on that basket, because we will have to abandon her. Things got so desperate with her. And that was, perhaps some people might listen to that and think that's, a desperate move from a distressed relative. But I don't think whilst it might sound implausible, I don't think it's an uncommon feeling sometimes when people are looking for care. And this is where social care really does fill an essential gap for people. So my grandmother did go into hospital at that point and then was moved to an elderly care home in the West Midlands. And I can remember going to visit her, and I was sort of 16, 17, and seeing basically her being cared for with everybody else in a room, 20 chairs all around the edge of the room, TV on, nobody watching it, the smells, the odours. Wow, what a first impression of care that made. And that's what inspired me, actually, because we can do so much better. We can do so much more. And that made me feel that it's got to be better than that. And that started me off on my journey to nursing, and also to care as well. I do also allude quite often to a BBC TV programme as well that was on at the time, still on now, but that was BBC's Casualty as well. Charlie Fairhead, it was absolutely my role model.
What an icon.
Absolutely. So to be compared to David Beckham at the beginning is one thing, but the ultimate for me would be to be compared to him.
I remember him well, actually. I remember him. He was the grey-haired chap, wasn't he? One of the senior clinicians, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. I see what you're going.
I've got the grey hair anyway now. But yeah, I think that, and then going and doing my nurse training, I also did work with St John Ambulance as well for a number of years, and that until sort of my nursing career took off sort of full time once I'd qualified and everything, was fantastic life experience to seeing people in different situations and always aiming to do better.
That's brilliant. Yes, it's interesting that it was actually the things you didn't like were the things that drove you to that career. Right? Often you see things that you like and you think, okay, I can get on board with this and learn and all of this. But I find that really interesting. It's actually the things that you didn't like were the things that drove you to be a nurse and move into social care like that.
Yeah, there's a bit of a theme really, because I spent 11 years being a deputy manager before I became a home manager, and did that in a variety of places with a variety of managers, and actually took from them all the things I didn't like that they did and decided I would never do those. And I spent a relatively short time being a home manager as a result of that, before a great industry tycoon is the wrong word, but for me, he was an icon as well at the time, a gentleman called Kevin Groombridge, who's still in the industry now. He took me to one side. It was literally the day after my youngest daughter was born, and I'd actually delivered her at home. And Kevin turned around to me, and he met me for the first time that next day in a pre-arranged meeting, and basically turned around to me and said, "The next time I've got where I need support or I need a new area manager, I'm giving you a call. Are you up for it?" And about 2 weeks later, that's how I ended up in area management. So I'm very grateful to that gentleman as well.
Wow. I find that really interesting, Mike. I'm always talking about the people that helped you along the way, and about kind of showing homage to them, and that recognition, because you just can't do it on your own, can you? It's impossible.
No, we forget that though sometimes when we talk, and we forget that we are actually a people business. It's like when we say about being a consultant, and you'll get testimonials through. I'm very lucky. I've got some wonderful testimonials from different people within the industry. But none of that I could have achieved without the support of other people around me actually delivering the outcomes that I'm suggesting and trying to steer us towards. It really is a team sport, is care.
Yeah. Something you said there, again, stuck with me, was about you stayed a deputy for 11 years at that deputy manager level. Would you say that was the favourite role that you ever had in employment, in the social care system? Was that kind of the sweet spot for you?
I think it certainly was at the time, because you still maintained your hands on, rather than flying the desk, as I call it. And I think compliance has really changed dramatically in the last 5 to 10 years. So much so it's even more challenging for any manager to get away from that desk.
Yeah.
And that is a real difficulty, I think, because it can take your eyes away from what it is you're responsible for. So that's where we've had to develop as an industry. The managers' walk-arounds, the meetings with relatives and residents, which all should have happened, but should have happened on the basis of knowledge rather than it happening on the basis of, well, whatever you raise, I'll have to look at and then come back to you about, which more often than not, that's pretty much most managers' response, depending on the size of home. But it's because it has to be, because the sheer scale and volume of compliance, and indeed of homes as well, and sometimes management structures that are perhaps not quite where they need to be sometimes, means that managers are so fearful of their accountability that it means that they're more hands-off than ideally what they would like. So that was very much the sweet spot for me. But I do say as well, working in operational management and working at director level as I have done, you can still have those moments. You can still have those interactions. You still make that difference. And one of the most recent sort of case studies, I suppose, of that is where having somebody ring up in distress, the care home's given notice on their mother. Nobody wants to actually go out of their way to try and support that case where she sadly got some behaviours that could be challenging for other people. And it's a case of, well, hold on a minute, let's come and have a look at the situation, and let's do an evaluation ourselves, and let's try and see what we can do to find a way to help you. Having that can do, find a solution attitude is imperative, not just for consultants, but anybody that works in health and social care.
Yeah. I find that really interesting, Mike. If we go back 10 years, 15 years, managers were out on the floor, hands-on much more. And it was really hard to try and get us into the office because we were out there. And, it was the opposite way around. Now you'd be completely forgiven for being in the office 100% of the time and still have tons of work to do. And it's the opposite mentality of trying to get us out of the office more, to get out and see the residents and spend time with the staff. Really interesting how that shifted so dramatically, right?
Yeah, it really is. And I think all the more this is where, the good modern manager and leaders now in care homes, they very much need their good lieutenants.
Yeah.
And with, when I say that, I don't just mean a deputy, I mean like a head of housekeeping, a really good catering lead, a really good handyman, really good administration, and collaboratively work as a team in order to drive the quality and to develop the home as a service people.
Yeah.
And very much so as well. But then you're looking at team leaders, your senior carers, your activities people as well. Yeah, everybody's got a real important part to play, and I think that's where valuing the people you work with is imperative to any turnaround operation as well.
Yeah. Another really interesting point there is, we go back a few years, it was the manager and deputy. Obviously lots and lots of great people in the home, but it's the manager and deputy that had that open line of communication. And then you fast forward to modern day, you've got everyone is at a deputy manager level, the administration, all the heads of departments are all sitting at that level now, where it's that open field of communication. I found that really interesting towards the end of my career in the homes. Just how important everybody was to that funnel of communication to me, really interesting how times have forwarded on, but also leaned in the fact of what you said at the beginning, Mike, about our industry needed to improve so dramatically, and now we fast forward to talking about these type of issues, which is the skills of our team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just going back to that deputy manager spot, I think it's a great role, isn't it? It's a great role that, you're getting your first introduction to perhaps auditing and quality assurance and reporting to the regulators, those type of introductions there. And then below that, you're still getting all of that lovely time with the people you're caring for. I really enjoyed that role. And it's a great position to be in.
Yeah, it is a sweet spot. I mean, you get a lot of feedback from families and relatives, and you get a lot of feedback from staff team that you're leading as well. Whereas sometimes as a manager, you could manage through people rather than lead people. And there's a real distinct difference between leadership and management, of course.
Yeah, that's another really. We're going to need to book another 6 podcasts after this. We've on 6 podcast episodes in one. Really, really interesting, that part. We hear about that a lot, don't we, Mike? Around the differences between management and leaders within care services.
Absolutely, yeah.
We're going to pin it.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's put some dates in the diary.
But you're going to say something then, Mike? So did I interrupt you?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, really, management and leadership. I think just going back to consultants and how consultants go into a service and support a service is also crucial to touch on.
Yeah.
Because some interesting experiences actually of where I followed other consultants on, and this is where I think C-CAF is really important because of the very stringent accreditation framework and the questions that we put people through to be able to make them a part of C-CAF. I think it's really important to sort of actually give that a bit of context, because in my consultancy career, I have found where I might be following on from other providers of consultancy services, and actually what they've done is just mimic what CQC would do and actually point out deficits rather than actually help a provider in order to turn those deficits around. And that's not me being negative about a fellow consultant before everybody starts writing in or sending me hate emails or what. this is me saying that there are consultants and consultants, and that's why you need the CARE accreditation consultant framework, because we need to have a sector ourselves as consultants that people can be reliant upon, where we're actually brought in to help solve problems, not create more problems. And unfortunately, sadly, a few businesses out there are actually not quite following that ethos. And, I think for us as a sector, as consultants, that actually is quite detrimental, because it actually can tarnish the reputation of care consultants. Generally, if you have a bad experience, well, CQC came in and they gave me this rating. Now you're coming in and all you're doing is telling me exactly the same, but you're not helping me fix it. Why would you go to another consultant?
Yeah.
So I think that's where, for anybody that's watching this that isn't already a member of C-CAF, get yourself signed up, get on the accreditation framework. And indeed, equally, if people need help to sort of transition their business to become that more collaborative, developing consultancy business that actually wants to grow and actually wants to support and help people rather than just signpost, then reach out, because there's a whole network of consultants there that can really help them as well.
That's brilliant, Mike. Thank you. So something really interesting there is that everyone you talk to has been around the industry for a while. Everybody has a horror story, similar to what you're trying to avoid saying. There are horror stories out there and you will hear them, but there are also some amazing stories. I've worked with some amazing consultants. I'm talking to a very, very good one now. And it's also shining the spotlight on those. That's what the C-CAF is all about. It's about shining a spotlight on the ones, on the consultants that do have the brilliant skills and the brilliant track record and, this great professional attitude. And it's also then just to signpost the ones that might need some more support to be able to offer those services to care providers. And bearing in mind, these care providers are taking care of some really poorly people at times. So we've got to protect that as well. And it's kind of everything that C-CAF is. It was born to be that way. So it's really, really good timing, Mike, to shine a spotlight.
Yeah, I think it's right to do so, because I think it's really good timing that C-CAF is now in place.
Yeah.
I think it's what the industry needs, because there is sadly this disparity at times.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure all of our listeners have enjoyed Mike talking today. Mike, thank you so much for coming on. And we'll book the next ticket in, hey?
Yeah, I'm ready for that.
Great. All right. Thanks, Mike. Enjoy your day.
Thanks, Luke.